Brandon Kessler leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on the lights streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Cloudcrest Hotel's headquarters in Harbor City. The morning sun carved out sharp rectangles on the pale carpeting, spotlighting every detail of the sumptuous interior. The polished walnut conference table, the oversized leather chairs, and the silent hum of the ventilation system. Brandon, 42 years old, had poured 15 years of his life into this company. Negotiating supplier contracts at dawn, overseeing renovations at dusk, patrolling every back corridor to make sure nothing fell through the cracks. And yet here he sat, about to be dismissed by his own sister. Across the table stood Danielle Kessler, her arms folded neatly beneath a tailored navy blazer that matched the sheen of her patent leather pumps. Exactly 11 days ago, she had been installed as president of Cloudcrest by their father, Henry Kessler, who had stepped back into the chairman's role. Back then, Brandon thought it was a temporary move, a nod to Danielle's relentless drive. He never imagined it would end like this. "You simply don't have what it takes to lead this company, Brandon," Danielle began, her voice measured and cold. Her eyes didn't meet his. They flicked to the assistant standing discreetly near the door, holding a manila envelope. "I've already informed the board that we need fresh perspectives." Brandon forced his face into a neutral mask as he slid open his desk drawer and began lifting framed photographs. Images of smiling employees at the Elmwood Inn, of himself shaking hands with linen suppliers at Pinewood Suites, of weary maintenance staff giving him weary waves in the dim service corridors. He placed each photo gently into a cardboard box on the floor. He made a point of not cracking the glass on the old sepia print of their grandfather, standing proudly in front of his very first hotel, now the landmark property in Crestwood. Danielle continued as though he were background scenery. "We've engaged a consultant from Fairmont to assume your responsibilities immediately. You'll receive 6 months severance, subject to the terms in human resources." He glanced up to see her checking her watch. Sleek, minimalist, exactly the image she projected. Gothic arched windows behind her framed the Harbor City skyline, but all Brandon saw was the narrowing set of her shoulders, the steadfast line of her jaw. "Nothing to say?" she prodded, her tone brittle. He allowed himself a small, sarcastic smile. "Good luck with the Crestwood renovation," he said quietly, an observation, not a question. For a heartbeat, he thought he saw panic flicker across her eyes. Crestwood was the largest of their chain's 8 properties. Its restoration was months behind schedule and tens of thousands of dollars over budget, a headache he'd been quietly solving until today. But she recovered quickly, smoothing the folds of her skirt. "We'll manage just fine," she replied coolly. "My consultant has turned around properties twice its size." Brandon nodded and, without another word, gathered the rest of his belongings. 15 years of hands-on work, packed into a 15-minute meeting. As he carried his box across the open-plan office, he caught sight of the receptionist's sympathetic stare. He offered her a brief nod before heading for the elevator. That night, tossing around his apartment overlooking Harbor City Harbor, Brandon barely slept. In the deep hush, he replayed his father's words from 5 years earlier. Words that now rang with prescience. Never put all your eggs in one basket. Henry had warned over brunch at Rosie's Corner Diner, their favorite haunt near the original corporate office. The small, red-checked tablecloths, the scent of sizzling bacon, the clinking of coffee cups. All were vivid in Brandon's mind. He rose at 5:30 the next morning, as he always did, binocular vision scanning the shoreline for any sign of trouble at their hotels. Normally, his phone buzzed with overnight alerts. Boiler malfunctions at Elmwood Inn, a scheduling conflict at Pinewood Suites, a late arrival with a special request. But this morning, nothing. Pure, unsettling silence. He brewed coffee, the dark liquid steaming in his palm, and stepped out onto his balcony. Container ships glided across the water, steady and methodical, just like his own approach to business, efficient, unostentatious, reliable. Then came a text from Miguel Santiago, head of maintenance at Crestwood. "Heard what happened. They're lost without you. New consultant already cutting corners. Renovations in worse shape than we thought." Brandon typed a curt thanks and left it at that. The truth was, it wasn't his problem anymore. Moments later, another ping, a message from Henry. "Breakfast at Rosie's, 8 a.m. The invitation felt like a summons to the battlefield. At 7:55, he arrived at the diner. His father sat in the corner booth, hunched over his coffee. Time had furrowed his brow more deeply since Brandon's childhood trips to this very spot. He told me after the fact, Henry said without preamble, lifting his gaze. His voice carried the weight of unspoken regret. It was your decision to let that happen, Brandon replied simply. Henry sighed, stirring his coffee with deliberate slowness. The waitress set down a stack of blueberry pancakes and a black coffee for him, eggs and toast for Brandon, without asking. A small mercy of routine in an otherwise fractured morning. Danielle believes Cloudcrest needs to evolve, Henry continued, eyes downcast. Become more corporate, less family-sequel. He paused, searching Brandon's face. And you agree? Brandon cut his eggs with precision, each slice parallel to the last. I think the board found her vision compelling, he allowed. Henry set his fork aside. The land beneath Elmwood, Pinewood, and Crestwood, all of it, he tapped his pancakes for emphasis. It's leased. Your sister doesn't fully understand that vulnerability. Brandon leaned back, sipping toast. Corporate documents explain it, he said. She doesn't read fine print unless forced. His father met his gaze. 3 months until those leases expire. He waited. I've already spoken with my lawyer, Brandon admitted. Henry exhaled, a sound of resignation and pride. What are you planning? Brandon looked out the diner window at the harbor beyond. The morning light glinted off the water in fragmented shards, like the pieces of his career now scattered. Simply market rate renewals, he said. Nothing more, nothing less. Henry reached across the table, placing a hand on Brandon's forearm. Your sister sees the big game, he said, voice soft. You see the foundations. Don't lose sight of that difference. Back at his condo, Brandon opened his home office, a quiet sanctuary of bookshelves and blueprints. Mounted on the wall was the framed schematic of the first Elmwood Inn, the one he had bought under lease 5 years ago. Beneath it, the deed to the land, secured with his own capital while Danielle basked in the spotlight. 2 weeks later, the phone rang. Danielle's name flashed on the caller ID. He let it go to voicemail. Her message was concise. Brandon, we need to discuss the transition. Some files are missing. Call me. No apology, no acknowledgement of the betrayal, just business. He deleted the message and spent the afternoon meeting with Avery Caldwell, an old college friend turned real estate developer. Plans for the upcoming lease renewal danced in his head. Strategic leverage, fair market rates, the leverage to reshape Cloudcrest's entire cost structure if necessary. Danielle arrived the next day at his condo unannounced. She brushed past him into the living room where he sat pouring coffee. You're ignoring me, she said, irritation in her tone. I'm respecting your decision to remove me from company affairs, he replied without looking up. She perched on the edge of his sofa, legs crossed. Vendor contracts, maintenance schedules, full renovation plans for Crestwood. Some files are gone. He set his mug down. Everything is on the shared drive, he said. Organized by property, by department. Exactly as always. Her heel tapped impatiently. Your system isn't intuitive. The consultant needs context. He shrugged. He's a hospitality specialist. I'm sure he can navigate. She stood abruptly, smoothing her skirt. This isn't helpful, Brandon. The company needs... I don't work for the company anymore, he interrupted, voice calm. Her face tightened. Fine, we'll have legal request them formally. Do what you must, he said, walking toward the door. A week later, a certified letter arrived from Cloudcrest's attorneys, demanding all operational documents. Brandon forwarded it to his own counsel. An itemized response confirming all materials already accessible on the corporate servers, with a polite reminder that his personal notebooks remained his possession. Meanwhile, calls began streaming in from disoriented Cloudcrest employees. The new consultant was slashing staff hours, deferring maintenance, replacing longtime suppliers with cheaper alternatives. Morale plummeted. Guests noticed the difference. Brandon felt a hollow ache. This was his team, his people. Then came an email from the property insurance underwriter, seeking clarification on recent ownership changes affecting their 3 flagship hotels. It seemed Danielle had failed to disclose the lease-to-own arrangement he'd quietly established. Brandon stared at the screen. The game board was set. The email had made one fact painfully clear. Cloudcrest didn't own the land beneath its flagship properties. I did. I sat at my mahogany desk that morning, the heirloom key to our family's first hotel now framed on the wall, warm between my fingers. It was the same brass key that opened the front door of Elmwood Inn, the tiny Burlington-style property our grandfather had rescued in his youth. That key had long symbolized stability and legacy. Now it felt like a bullet against my palm, a reminder that I'd spent half my life laying foundations, only to see them threatened. Without typing a response, I forwarded the insurance company's inquiry to Patricia, my corporate attorney. The silence that followed felt charged. Mid-afternoon, my phone buzzed. It was my father. "Brandon, did you know about the leases?" His voice was taut, betraying the worry he rarely showed. I sat up straighter. "I did. I structured those leases 5 years ago." There was a long pause, then a sigh. "Danielle doesn't read fine print. She's called an emergency board meeting, accusing you of hiding critical information." "Hidden?" I asked. "Every lease is fully documented in the corporate archives. The board minutes say Cloudcrest been paying rent to BK Holdings." My pulse quickened as I realized what he meant. "You mean the accounting shows payments to me?" "Yes," he said, sounding genuinely astonished. "BK Holdings, your name's on it." My sister had been signing off on financial statements for years, approving payments made to her own brother without realizing it. The revelation carried both irony and poetic justice. All that time she believed she controlled the company, yet it was quietly paying tribute to the one person she'd just cast aside. "The meeting's tomorrow," Dad reminded me. "You should be there." I closed my eyes and pictured the boardroom at Harbor City headquarters, polished terrazzo floors, the ever-present hum of the climate control system, the chaos that always seemed to follow our family's gatherings. "I'm not on the board anymore," I said. "Brandon," he softened, "this is still our family business." I hung up and stared at the blank screen. Family business indeed, but families were supposed to protect one another, not push each other off cliffs. An hour later, over the clink of glass in her downtown office, Patricia delivered her assessment. "Cloudcrest's counsel is requesting documentation on lease renewals," she explained, swirling her coffee. "How do you want to respond?" I leaned forward, steepling my fingers. "Send them the new terms, market rate, no exceptions." She blinked. "That will blow them out of the water." "Exactly," I replied, picturing the board's collective gasp as they saw the numbers. The suppressed below-market rates I'd quietly granted 5 years ago had saved Cloudcrest nearly $2 million annually across the Elmwood, Pinewood, and Crestwood sites. Now those discounts were gone. Late afternoon sunlight painted the facade of Crestwood Hotel in gold as I sat in my car across from its entrance. The 8-story building stood proudly on the corner of Ocean Boulevard and Bay Avenue, its arched windows reflecting the ebb and flow of Casco Bay. I'd watched this transformation, from a weary motor lodge to one of our chain's most stunning landmarks, complete with ocean-facing suites and a rooftop bar. It had been my personal project, my pride. My phone vibrated, a text from Patricia. "They've received your lease terms. Expect a response today." All I had to do now was wait. Moments later, a sleek black sedan rolled up. Danielle stepped out, phone pressed to her ear, her stride purposeful. She wasn't scheduled to be in Harbor City until next week. I slid out of the car and ducked behind a palm tree planter. Through the hotel's glass doors, I could see her conference with the new hospitality consultant, both hunched over blueprints spread on a sleek marble table. Curiosity overcame me. I dialed Miguel Santiago, head of maintenance at Crestwood. He answered on the first ring. "Your sister's here on emergency inspection," he whispered. "She's brought the consultant too." "What are they looking for?" He hesitated. "Property documents, original surveys, structural reports. Between us, I think they're trying to challenge your ownership claim on the land." My jaw tightened. "Thanks, Miguel." That evening, I drove straight to the Pinewood County Records Office. Using the terminal in the public research room, I accessed the original deed transfers, boundary surveys, and all lease agreements. Every sheet bore my signature, legally ironclad. Relief washed over me as I verified each document. But then something in the adjacent file cabinet caught my eye. A permit application filed under Danielle's married name 2 years earlier. It was an application for a commercial-scale development on undeveloped waterfront land just outside the city limits. land that by geography directly competed with our Pinewood Suites property. The contract was handled by Kessler Vision LLC, an entity I'd never heard mentioned in Cloudcrest board meetings. I searched further. Similar permit applications appeared in Elmwood County and in the coastal district where Crestwood Hotel stood, all under Kessler Vision LLC, all intended for luxury hotel or condo hotel projects. My chest tightened. While I was busily running our family's business, Danielle had been quietly plotting her own rival chain. I called Patricia immediately. I need you to investigate Kessler Vision LLC. 2 days later, she had the full dossier. Danielle had pitched to high-net-worth investors for nearly 3 years, promising a boutique brand that would siphon away Cloudcrest's loyal clientele. Her business plan explicitly referenced leveraging our established reputation in Elmwood, Pinewood, and Harbor City. She'd been building her empire on the back of our family's name, while kicking me out of the very company that bore it. On the morning of the emergency board meeting, my phone buzzed again. It was an unexpected caller ID. Vincent Ross, one of Danielle's business school friends and a board member. "Brandon," he said quietly, "I've seen the lease terms, and I'm hearing rumors about Kessler Vision." "Not rumors," I stated, "facts." There was a pause. "I respected your father, which is why I joined the board. Danielle told us you stepped away voluntarily." I heard papers shuffle. The meeting's at 2, full board, in Harbor City. Danielle plans to propose selling Elmwood, Pinewood, and Crestwood properties, claims the renewals will cripple profitability. My blood ran cold as the final piece clicked into place. She wanted Cloudcrest to divest its crown jewels, then scoop them up at bargain prices through her own venture, making me her landlord in perpetuity. I thanked Vincent and hung up, letting fury wash over me like ice water. This was no longer mere corporate maneuvering. It was betrayal. Rather than attend the meeting, I booked a red-eye to New York. I needed an ally. By morning, I was sitting across from Julian Hayes, CEO of Commonwealth Hotels, in his soaring office overlooking Central Park. He'd courted me at industry conferences in the past. I'd always declined out of loyalty to Cloudcrest. Loyalty, it turned out, had a price. Cloudcrest, is considering divesting prime properties, he said, leaning back in his leather chair. Sand properties? I confirmed. Elmwood, Pinewood, Crestwood. He raised an eyebrow. And you own the land beneath them? I nodded. Market rate lease terms are in place. I've set the table for negotiation. He smiled, purely professional. What's your proposal? I slid a leather folder across his desk. Detailed financial analyses, occupancy reports, and my proposition. Commonwealth would purchase the buildings at fair market price, while I retained land ownership and granted preferential 5-year lease terms back to Commonwealth. He studied the numbers, then looked out at the park. You could simply raise rent and force your sister to keep operating. Better returns, I agreed. But she's launching a competing chain, he said, surprise flickering. Ambitious? I met his gaze coolly. She's already courting investors. Her business plan targets Cloudcrest's core markets. Julian chuckled. Awkward. I nodded. Commonwealth's reputation for keeping staff intact matters. I won't see long-time employees laid off in pursuit of profit. He regarded me for a moment. Family businesses can complicate things. This isn't about family, I replied. It's about integrity and protecting the people who built these hotels. 2 days later, Commonwealth's legal team delivered a formal acquisition proposal for Elmwood Inn, Pinewood Suites, and Crestwood Hotel. Simultaneously, I discreetly informed Miguel and other key managers at each property of the potential transaction, and reassured them their jobs would be secure. Within 24 hours, a hospitality trade blog published an expose on Cloudcrest's internal turmoil and Commonwealth's interest in the properties. Danielle responded with a company-wide email, flatly denying any plans to sell and extolling Cloudcrest's solid financial footing. That evening, Dad called, voice heavy. The board rejected her sale proposal. Good. I'm glad, I said simply. She's furious, he continued. Claims you're undermining the company. I'm protecting its future, I replied. She found out about Commonwealth, he added. What are you trying to accomplish, Brandon? I let the question hang before answering. Justice. Fairness. The chance for Cloudcrest to move forward with people who care about its legacy. 3 weeks later, Cloudcrest's quarterly report was released. Revenue down 8%, operating costs up 15%. The stock price slid 12% in a single session. That afternoon, I received a board summons, this time including only Dad and the independent members, not Danielle, requesting my presence in Harbor City. When the day arrived, I walked through the familiar double doors of headquarters for the first time in months. Danielle sat at the head of the long conference table, her composure taut. To her right, Dad looked older than I remembered, eyes shadowed with regret. Seated around us were the board members, Vincent Ross among them, expressions guarded. I chose the seat opposite Danielle, opened my portfolio, and waited. She began coldly. Let's be clear. My brother is attempting a hostile takeover of the business our father built. Incorrect, I replied evenly. I'm exercising my rights as a landowner. Commonwealth's proposal is for Cloudcrest to sell its buildings it no longer wishes to manage. Vincent cleared his throat. The board never approved sales. The board was given incomplete information, I countered, sliding copies of Patricia's due diligence report to each member. These documents proved Danielle, while serving as president of Cloudcrest, was simultaneously developing a competing hotel chain in Elmwood, Pinewood, and Crestwood markets through Kessler Vision, LLC. A stunned silence fell. My father's hand trembled as he opened his folder. Danielle's face went white. This is preposterous, she sputtered. Kessler Vision's business plan explicitly states its intent to leverage expertise and clientele cultivated at Cloudcrest, I continued, and Commonwealth's offer exceeds current valuations with guarantees to retain all existing employees and honor guest commitments, something Kessler Vision never intended. Danielle's voice shook. You bought the land to trap me. No, I said softly. I secured it to protect our family legacy. Maybe it's something you decided I no longer belonged to. Vincent stood. Given these revelations, the board will request your resignation, Danielle. Her chair scraped back. Without a word, she stormed from the room. The board then voted unanimously, save for Dad, who abstained, to accept Commonwealth's acquisition. As the papers were signed, I caught Dad's eye. He gave me a small, sad nod. The company we'd built together was about to enter a new chapter, one founded on transparency, respect, and the knowledge that true stewardship lies not in controlling the narrative, but in honoring the foundation beneath it. My sister's parting words still echoed in my mind as the board meeting adjourned. We'll need interim leadership while we restructure, Vincent Ross had said, gesturing toward me as though I were a stopgap measure. I'd met his gaze and given a slight shake of the head. That won't be me, I had replied. I've made other arrangements. It felt both liberating and bittersweet to walk out on Cloudcrest's polished marble floors one final time. I'd dedicated 2 decades to building those foundations, and now I was choosing to leave the tremors of familial conflict behind. In the weeks that followed, I handed over every internal project file to Commonwealth's transition team, said heartfelt farewells to the staff I'd mentored, and cleared out my office desk. I'd boxed up the last of my personal mementos, the brass key to Elmwood Inn, a faded photograph of my grandfather's first property, hand-drawn schematics for Pinewood Suites lobby renovation, and passed through the glass doors into the late summer afternoon sun. 12 months later, I found myself standing on the rooftop terrace of the property once known as Crestwood Hotel, now rebranded Harborview and heralded as the flagship of Commonwealth Hotel's Northeast Collection. The terrace overlooked Casco Bay, its slate-gray waters dotted with sailboats heading into the afternoon breeze. Flower boxes brimmed with lavender and sweet alyssum, and wrought iron bistro tables invited guests to linger over cocktails as the sun dipped low on the horizon. It was a space I'd helped transform but never fully claimed, until now. As I leaned on the terrace railing, I noticed familiar faces. Miguel Santiago, the head of maintenance who'd followed me to Commonwealth, climbed the spiral staircase 2 floors below, carrying a toolbox and greeting guests with his usual warm nod. The concierge at the front desk, a young woman named Priya, whom I'd met during the Crestwood renovation, recognized me and waved, her smile genuine. Several long-term staff members I'd worked alongside under Cloudcrest management still staffed the rooftop bar, tossing their heads in surprise at my appearance before offering new promotions and handshakes. The harbor view retained its original Art Deco facade, cream-colored brick, contrasted by cobalt blue accents, yet inside it gleamed with updated brass fixtures, custom-woven carpets, and subtle nautical motifs that paid homage to the bay. The Cloudcrest sign above the entrance had been replaced by the Commonwealth logo, a pair of seagulls in flight, one silver, one gold. It was a small change, but it felt symbolic of everything I had left behind and everything I had gained. Julian Hayes appeared at my side, handing me a quarterly performance report in a crisp navy folder, embossed with Commonwealth seal. His pinstriped suit and precisely folded pocket square reminded me of the first time we'd met in New York, when I'd pitched him on this very partnership idea. Revenue is up 17% compared to last year, he said, eyes lighting up as he pointed to the chart. You were absolutely right about this market's potential. I scanned the figures. Occupancy rates at 94%, guest satisfaction scores soaring north of 9.2 out of 10, event bookings filling the rooftop terrace every weekend through mid-October. I'm delighted to see it, I replied, tracing the upward slope with my fingertip. This place had tremendous untapped value. I always knew its foundation was strong. Julian nodded. As Commonwealth's consulting director for regional properties, you've been instrumental behind the scenes, negotiating with local suppliers, recruiting and training staff, refining our guest amenities. No corner office politics, just the work you love. I allowed myself a quiet smile. That's all I ever wanted, I said. To build something lasting without playing the endless boardroom chess games. We stood in companionable silence as the late afternoon sun cast long shadows over the terrace. Boats cut graceful arcs on the bay, their white sails taut in the breeze. A server passed by with a tray of elderflower cocktails, fragrant with mint, and Julian accepted one before clearing his throat. Have you seen your father lately? He asked carefully. I nodded. We meet for dinner once a month at Rosie's Corner Diner, the little red check booth near Elmwood Inn. Just like old times. He's adjusting to full retirement. After the acquisition, he stepped down from Cloudcrest entirely. Julian studied me with a hint of sympathy. And how is he handling it? Better than I expected, I said. He takes comfort in knowing the properties he built are in good hands. He still misses the day-to-day, but he's proud of what we've accomplished. He glanced toward the bay. And your sister? I took a slow breath, watching a ferry glide past. Kessler Vision LLC filed for bankruptcy protection last month. A lot of those investor funds dried up once the blog expose hit. Turns out hotel development requires more than ambition and a fancy business degree. I said it without satisfaction or regret. I wish it hadn't come to that, but she overextended. Julian nodded. I heard some of the details. Tough break? It was her own doing, I reflected. She underestimated the complexities. Zoning laws, environmental surveys, community resistance. Meanwhile, I worked quietly with local officials and staff to ensure every renovation was above board. Together we watched the tide begin to roll in, the bay taking on a deeper shade of blue. Eventually, Julian excused himself for his next meeting, leaving me alone on the terrace with only my thoughts and the call of a distant gull. My phone buzzed, a text from my father. Dinner tonight? Bringing the grandkids. I smiled and tapped a quick reply. Can't wait, see you at 6. My niece and nephew, innocent of their mother's corporate maneuvers, were the brightest lights in this saga. As I'd navigated boardroom betrayals and legal battles, I'd made sure never to let my relationship with them suffer. Their laughter over pancakes at Rosie's had been a balm to my soul. 2 little reminders of what truly mattered beyond spreadsheets and leases. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I took one last look at Harborview's silhouette against the glowing sky. The building's form was elegant, but I found myself thinking not of the windows or the rooftop bar, but of the land beneath its foundation. Patient, steadfast, unshakable ground, supporting every beam, every guest room, every scandal, and every triumph. In that reflection, I realized how profoundly Danielle had misunderstood our father's counsel all those years ago. Success wasn't measured by who occupied the grandest office or who secured the flashiest title. It was built on trust, on relationships with staff and community, on a foundation that could withstand storms both literal and metaphorical. I turned and descended the marble staircase, joining the valet area where a gleaming midnight green sedan waited to take me to dinner. The evening air carried the promise of blueberry pancakes and black coffee, of stories shared across the diner's red vinyl booths. Most importantly, it whispered of family, flawed, resilient, and ultimately unbreakable.